Hi, we're delighted to have John Arndt here with us. He's our new musician in residence at Timothy Eaton Memorial Church for the next 3 months. John, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
We're excited to have John for a couple of reasons that are clear from his website and his presence on the web in general. John has won not one Grammy. I mean, any idiot can win one Grammy, right? But two of those things. He and a lifelong friend started a group called The Brilliance that's written a lot of the worship songs that you're probably familiar with, but don't know that he was behind. We're just really excited about the way our contemporary worship especially will feel refreshed over the next few months. John, I'm curious if you can talk about how you view the kind of music that you do. And I ask especially because as part of a mainline liberal denomination like the United Church of Canada, we sometimes rush in to do what evangelicals were doing decades ago. And meanwhile, you and your friends have been inhabiting old church space, taking up traditions that have been discarded and saying, hey, this mysterious stuff is great. Like, why would you discard this?
Well, to try to give you a short answer, my first education in music was in the church that I grew up in Wisconsin. And in that church, it was very experience-based, and it was centered around the power of music, the way that music could change people. And so my first education in music was really about the power of music. And since those early days, I've spent a lot of time training myself and learning about the history of music, and spent many years studying classical music and orchestration, as well as jazz and the history of American pop music. And I believe that in order to make anything new, you have to understand where you're coming from. And as it turns out, whether it's in language or in writing or music, it doesn't matter. As a human being, all we do is reflect what we've heard. And you hear things from the past or things from tradition, and you internalize it and reflect it back. So I tend to conceptualize what I do musically as a reflecting back. And I find this space in particular to be a place where I already feel super at home in terms of the way that I can connect to something much, much larger than me in the creation of beauty in service of a community.
It's really exciting. It's very similar to how I think you understand your work already as a musician here, Elaine, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think music making is just such a communal thing. It brings so much more people together. Growing up, I think, John, you and I have talked about that. We get excited collaborating with people, bring the beauty with music through so many more people doing that is just, that's the power of music that I really think. And to use it in a worship way, it just kind of really bring all of us closer to God and to the words. And that's so important too. And speaking of that, I want to ask you, John, you've done some really big work, arranging, orchestrating, doing some studio recording for quite a few well-known bands. Porter Skate is one, yep. Sharpest Collective. Tell us a little bit more about that, because that is something that's out of my comfort zone, and I'm marveling at the artistry that you can bring in there.
Wow. Well, I feel lucky in my life that the base reality of what I do is I dream with my best friends, and we turn those dreams into real things. We turn it into music, and that music we put out into the world, and the world responds to us. And it's created this whole life and reality for me that I wouldn't trade for anything. And for me, the creative process is fundamental to my day-to-day life. And even though it's a personal thing, and hearing that voice and being open to ideas, for me, it's always fundamentally communal. And I can only be so happy when I'm alone in a room practicing or writing. At some point, I need to bring other people into the picture. And a huge part of my career has been in working with other artists. And I find so much joy in hearing a work of theirs that's not quite completed. And the job for me is often, the way I think about it is first to understand it and understand on a, a structural level, but also on an emotional level, what is happening there, and then deciding what needs to be done to draw out what the artist is trying to do. And yeah, I certainly find the most fulfillment in this career in the context of others.
You were mentioning something. So last week was Good Friday at the time of filming this video, and John has learned the Keith Getty Power of the Cross and listened to it and played around with how you draw the text. And you decided to make a very deliberate change from the original. And tell us a little bit about that, if you remember that process.
Yeah, let's see. Took the blame, bore the shame, we are forgiven at the cross. Yeah, I guess that phrase in the recordings that I heard when I was learning it, we tended to, the people recording it or arranging it tended to blow through that phrase, we are forgiven at the cross. And I think there was like a measure, it was shortened. And to me, it was, in terms of the phrasing, it was the most important part. So I decided to take extra time there at I am forgiven, knowing that there would be a large group of people that would blow through and go to the next part. But I figured, thematically it was worth the risk, because we could all make a mistake together, be forgiven at the cross. Everyone learned it pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I enjoy interpreting songs, as opposed to, say, just like there's a place for taking a text and performing it to the letter, and there's a lot to be said about that. But a lot of what I really enjoy doing is learning a basic text and then making it something new for today, what feels right now.
In my field, in preaching, there are some who advocate for preaching without notes. My predecessor, Andrew Sterling, did that here for 23 years. I don't do it. But one advocate for preaching without notes says, you don't have to memorize your sermon to preach without notes. You have to understand it. That's a different thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm struck by your description. The first thing you do with a piece of music you're going to do something new with is you have to understand it. It seems so simple you shouldn't have to say it, but you do, don't you?
Yeah. Well, then there's multiple levels of understanding. Like, first it's understanding like what's going on chordally, tonally, what instruments are happening. But then there's also like understanding what the intention of the artist is. Also understanding the lyrics and what's the what's the progression of the song, what's it leading to, what's important. I feel a lot of layers of understanding episodes.
This is so interesting to get a sense of your thought process behind it. And by the way, like, it's mind-blowing how fast John works. This Power of the Cross probably only took him about 15 minutes really conceptualizing and learning it and learning the text, and made it as his own. And as a musician, I was geeking out about that because he was just landed in Toronto and boom, there's a new arrangement.
No pressure to repeat that.
I'm just so excited about that. And I really like a couple of things. For those that know music, I thought that would be really cool to also say that, John, you seem to have went with the audio recording first and also listening to the text, listening to the overall feeling of the piece. And you told me descriptively, which I have thought a lot about that since you mentioned this, you did not want to see the original chord chart.
Oh, yeah.
And I see it because I am a different type of musician that
It puts things in a box.
Exactly. And now I can't unsee, those chord structure that was originally written. So for the fact that you hear the concept and the idea and the intention and thoughtfulness behind the piece and make it your own, it makes sense. I don't know why I've never done that before. I'm already learning so much, and we've only known each other for, collective of 8 days or something.
This brings a story to mind of a favorite collaborator of mine named Tyler Chester, who's this incredible music producer. in Los Angeles. And there was one time where I was walking into a session with an artist I'd never worked with, and a bunch of people. I was maybe feeling some pressure, and the lady whose song I was about to record handed me a chart, and Tyler waved the chart away and said, "John doesn't need a chart. He's a pro." And I remember he said that, and I initially was like, well, I mean, I'll take a look at it. Like, I don't want to screw this up. But then what I've learned since then is that when I go into a creative space like that, without the paper, my senses are fully tuned in to what is happening right here, right now in front of me. And it actually becomes a lot easier to internalize the song when you're fully present with it, as opposed to interpreting these symbols and making it fit with what's happening. Because what can often happen is I'm looking at the symbols and she does something different. I'm like, hey, that's not what's in the chart, but then we're not present. We're somewhere else. So
This is fascinating, and I'm always very interested to change up the wording of how people describe musicians. There's this ongoing joke that sometimes it will bring out in music schools that I don't like personally, but it's a little bit of stereotype. It is somewhat of a true. And they always say, how do you silence a classical musician? You take the music away from them. How do you silence a jazz musician? You put music in front of them. Now, stereotypes.
somewhat accurate.
At the same time, I think both of us are musicians that, yes, even though my training was predominantly a classical musician, I don't really like to call myself a classical musician. I like to try myself to be as versatile as possible. And you yourself as well, I know you don't categorize yourself just as a jazz musician. You are a lot of things, right? So I would actually encourage everyone to think about terms that connect to our work more. As a conductor, I think of myself more as a collaborator, as a facilitator. Some of my friends laugh about me, and I sometimes say that I don't think that I'm that creative because I really make already written music come to life. I work with voices that come to me, but I think I'm a good music connector and bring people together and build a community together, and that's my strength. And meanwhile, I think John is truly a creator. Like, you are creating artists, and you can look at a blank canvas and that excites you, while I look at a blank canvas, I don't know what to start.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, we have now seen you do some originals, some arrangements. Do you have a preference of, what's your process when you have traditional hymns and make it 2024 sounding versus writing original music? Do you have a preference of what
Honestly,
you like more?
I look forward to learning the Timothy Eaton book. And I plan on, as much as you all want, doing the songs that you're familiar with. And I feel that in the creative life, the best gift you can have is constraints. And being a servant to this community is an opportunity for me to work within a certain level of constraints with love. And I look forward to learning these songs and delving into whatever the ideas are, whatever's happening harmonically, and maybe make some decisions that be like, I feel like it might be better today if it's a little bit more like that. Better, we'll see. We'll see.
I mean, they often say of Shakespeare that he really didn't have creative ideas. He received stories that existed and said, what if we just tweak this thing here?
Totally.
And then it made a genius, right? Like there's different kinds of creativity, right? And people like me, I'm not a musician. I tend to assume music is creation from nothing. You guys are describing it in very different terms, much more communal, much more receiving what has gone before and just changing it slightly, right? It's good.
It's a thing that's occurred to me with the blank canvas problem which can be a huge problem. I'm currently dealing with a number of my own blank canvases that are tormenting me. And the thing that is just so real at the end of the day, I just realized, I said this before, but I just realized ever since I woke up to this whole mess, all I've been doing is reflecting back what I'm hearing. And so for me to think that like there's something more than that, or that, you know, I have to come up with a brand new invention that redefines everything, you know, I'll never be able to create another piece ever.
Wow.
You know?
Elaine and I speak a fair bit about what we can accomplish here at Timothy Eaton that's unique. We have gifted enough classical musicians and singers that we can pull off really difficult music, but then we can also reflect on it theologically. And it was often, almost always, inspired by theological rationale, trying to make a point within, sometimes against, but certainly with reference to the church. I'm just struck, John, it seems to me also we can accomplish something here that's kind of unique. We can do contemporary worship in a way that's proud of its traditional reception, but that's not conservative in a kind of conservative evangelical way that often that kind of music gets mixed up with. I just wonder what you think we can do here that's unique.
Well,
Too big a question, I realize.
yeah, I mean, in terms of what's unique, I'm not sure, but I would say if in like a dream scenario for me with this place would be to be a part of a growing community of musicians that love working together and creating stuff of great beauty and meaning. And you know, the chase for uniqueness can be
The blank canvas again.
yeah, you know, you can kind of get lost in that a little bit. I think it's something that will happen naturally. I guess that for me it's about following my instincts, you know, in terms of, it's like what makes me unique. It's like all these things that I don't even realize I'm doing, you know?
All these inheritances.
Yeah. So it's like I think the unique thing is just gonna happen.
That's good. Yeah.
I'll try not to sweat it too much.
Indeed. Maybe a final question?
Yeah. 3 months in Toronto. You
Doesn't
haven't.
seem long enough.
I know you've only been here for a few days, and already you want to stay longer. Which the feeling is mutual. Personally, right away. And
probably
I'm like,
work that out.
This is really exciting. Is there anything excites you about Toronto? So John has never lived in Toronto, never lived in Canada. Originally from Wisconsin, bounced between New York and LA and anywhere that
Paris?
Austin, Texas. Anywhere his music takes you. What are you excited about having a little bit of home base? And is there anything you want to know more about Toronto that might excite you more?
What excites me most about Toronto is, I would say, the last 8 years of my life have been defined by constant travel, a nomadic existence. I have been incredibly lucky and have leaned into this unique opportunity I have in life that did not exist, you know, even 30 years ago, where the music that I make through the internet can be listened to by people all over the world, and I can get paid for it and collaborate with people all over the world, and I can get paid for it. I can live anywhere I want. And so I've spent a number of years really leaning into that. So like realizing, wow, this is really unique, and I shouldn't shy away from this. I should lean into it. And so I've been leaning into that. However, I am reaching this point in my life where I am seeing that I don't have, my roots are lacking. My roots in life, they're kind of oddly spread throughout the world, which is cool. And I've, you know, very deep friendships, deep family relationships that I communicate with these people every day. But one thing that I would love to have in my life is home.
Wow.
Well, funny you ended with that, because 3 of us on these chairs were not Toronto native. And Jason, I'm hoping that you're starting to feel like Toronto is home.
Yes.
And to me, Toronto is absolutely home. I cannot see myself living anywhere outside of Canada at this time of my life. Some of the things that I would like to share with you that I think Toronto will hopefully to continue to feel like a welcoming place to you is a vibrant art scene. Is got wonderful musicians, wonderful people, but also people that is always eager to learn and grow. I don't know, is it just because I'm lucky to be surrounded by, musicians that are fantastic and of world-class level. But what I love about all of them, that we kind of all just grow together through our music connections together. And that is something I hope that Toronto will welcome you in. I don't know, what do you think about that, Jason?
I think most places, like most people, their strengths and their weaknesses are very similar to each other, right? So Toronto, there's a hustle in Toronto. And some of it's Bay Street, some of it's the university, some of it's just a new city. Montreal's 300 years older. So the hustle is admirable because it produces amazing things. It's also annoying because the city's in a hurry and nobody ever stops and listens to each other, right? So I admire the hustle. I see it in y'all as musicians insisting on getting better. And I love that, being unwilling to be satisfied. I want to say, you guys sound amazing enough to me, but you're not satisfied, and it's glorious. There are moments where I kind of wish, we could trade with Montreal's gifts and kind of say, some afternoons you should kind of exhale and do nothing, or Paris's gifts.
Kind of French.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. But the home thing, I've lived in Chicago, I've lived in Vancouver, I've lived in Durham, England. My family and I, we don't know where home is either, in a way. We don't know where we'll be buried. That's one way to put the fact that you don't know where home is, right? Or you probably won't be buried. But I like that when I'm in each of those places, I know my way around. But none of them are quite home, right? So in a way, there are gifts of living in lots of places that are amazing. And there's something lost there, right? So an Indigenous friend of mine who's Cree, if you ask what it means to be Indigenous, he says, being Indigenous means you're eating food grown from the ground where your ancestors are buried, right? So, for Asians or for Europeans in North America, that's not possible. When we came here from some other place. Mm-hmm. So I guess the question of what home is a complicated one, right? Yeah. And it ultimately feels like a theological question. Like, home really is with God and God's people. But that's too lazy in a way. Like, having a patch of earth you cherish that you wouldn't mind being buried in. It's got to be something like that, right?
There's that, and I also feel like there's a way of life element for me personally, in terms of being connected to a community that exists in physical space.
Yeah.
And having responsibilities associated with that community that I think will be helpful for somewhat of a home concept.
Love it. Mm-hmm. That's good. Well, that's about all we have, I think.
I think that's all we have. Well, we're very excited, really, John, to
say hi to me if you see me.
Come on Sunday mornings every 9:15 for the next 3 months. We're going to hear John play some beautiful music, keep teaching us a thing or two, and I continue to marvel at his efficiency and in making beautiful music happen. There are also a couple of other events that we will hear John. April 18th, there's a wine and cheese to also tell us a little bit about Komi's painting.
Yeah, so you'll notice in the foyer of the church, we've got a painting by Komi Olaf, who's a Nigerian-Canadian painter who's part of our congregation. It's the three magi with an angel pointing out the way they should go home instead of via Herod's way. It's really a stunning piece of art. You saw me use it in preaching during Advent, and he's loaned it to us for the foreseeable future. So the night when we have John play our new piano, Komi will give an artist talk about the Magi painting, and that is April 18th.
April 18th. And on the same night, lots to celebrate. We're very thankful for a lovely donor donating a new Yamaha grand piano for us in the atrium. So John will be there playing some beautiful music.
So cool.
Komi's painting will be there. It will be fantastic.
So I'm sure that you've got somebody that you've wanted to invite to the 9:15 service at Timothy Eaton for a long time. The next 3 months are an excuse to go ahead, drive to that person's house, pick them up, go to church together, and then go to the nicest brunch you can think of. And then you can thank us later. So there we are.
We'll see you on Sunday.
All right. Bye.